My daughter-in-law breezed into my kitchen wearing her trademark sunny smile, balancing two steaming mugs as though she were presenting royal treasures. "I made you something special," Patricia chirped, holding one out to me in that overly sweet tone that reminded me of artificial sweetener, cloying, artificial, and probably not good for you. The coffee's scent was wrong. Not foul exactly, but sharp, chemical, unsettling. Through 30 years of putting criminals away, my instincts screamed. Patricia turned to the fridge for cream, her movements just a little too measured. In that instant, I switched the mugs. Luckily, they were identical white ones. Subtlety has never been my strong suit. "There you go," she said, settling into the chair across from me with what was now her own original cup. "Drink it while it's hot." Her smile was the kind captured in posed family photos, the kind taken moments before someone files for divorce. Michael sat in the living room, newspaper in hand, exactly as he had every Sunday morning since marrying Patricia 3 months earlier. They'd known each other only 6 months before tying the knot, lightning fast, but then again, when money's the goal, why waste time? I tried to support them, but Patricia always felt scripted, as though playing the role of devoted daughter-in-law rather than living it. We chatted about the weather and Michael's job while I pretended to sip my coffee, my eyes on Patricia as she took her first swallow. Her face twitched slightly, as though the taste surprised her, and she put the cup down without another sip. She said nothing, which was interesting. 20 minutes later, she began coughing, not the polite kind that clears a throat, but deep, racking fits that left her gasping. "Something's wrong," she wheezed, gripping the table as her face flushed and panic reached her eyes. "Michael," I called, part of me genuinely curious at this turn of events. Michael rushed in as she bent over, struggling for breath. "Take me to the hospital," she pleaded, clutching his arm. During the frantic drive, I couldn't stop thinking, that coffee was meant for me. Patricia had poisoned herself with her own weapon. The ER was chaos. Her condition worsened, more violent coughing, difficulty breathing, an angry rash spreading across her neck. The doctors worked quickly, asking questions none of us could answer without admitting to attempted murder. When Michael left to fetch her belongings from home, I sat in the waiting room, replaying everything. Hours later, he returned, just in time for Dr. Rodriguez to appear with a grave expression. "We found traces of a toxic substance in her bloodstream," he said. "This appears to be deliberate poisoning." Before I could process the irony, Patricia's voice emerged from behind the curtain, clear and pointed. "She poisoned my coffee." She was staring straight at me, finger trembling in accusation. Minutes later, the police arrived. Detective Martinez separated us for statements. I told them the truth, the odd smell, my decision to switch cups, how Patricia drank what had been meant for me. I left out how satisfying it was to watch her suffer from her own plot. "Mrs. Wilson," Martinez asked carefully, "if you thought it was dangerous, why not refuse it?" "Fair question." "I wasn't certain," I replied. "I just knew something smelled off." Michael's statement hurt more than any accusation from a stranger. "My mother's been acting strangely. I don't think she'd hurt anyone, but that hesitation spoke volumes." That evening, Martinez said they needed to verify some things at my home, a polite way of saying they intended to search. Within 20 minutes, they found a small bottle of clear liquid hidden in my bathroom cabinet, along with a handwritten list including Patricia's name and a receipt for chemical supplies. The handwriting looked disturbingly like mine. "I've never seen that before," I said flatly, but the officers exchanged knowing looks. "Highly suspicious," one muttered. Martinez informed me they'd return in the morning with a full search warrant to examine my computer. They left a patrol car outside for my protection, more obviously to watch me. Standing at my kitchen window, I realized I was no longer the complainant. I was the suspect. The planting of evidence was obvious. Someone had used the hospital window to frame me. Whoever it was had skill, access, and a disturbing sense of timing. By morning, anxiety gripped me like a vice. I called the one person I trusted, Frank Morrison, my partner from the prosecutor's office for 20 years. Frank, I'm in trouble, I said. Tell me everything, he replied. I recounted the coffee, Patricia's collapse, the planted evidence, the police surveillance. 20 minutes later, Frank called back. They're issuing a warrant tomorrow morning. You need to get out now. I slipped out through my back garden, evading the patrol car, and drove to a train station 2 towns away. After a maze of connections, I reached Frank's door by evening, officially a fugitive from the very system I'd served. If you want, I can continue with part 2 right away. It will pick up from Eleanor hiding at Frank's and beginning the investigation into Patricia. This will keep the style consistent and maintain all plot details while making it unique. Frank's guest room felt less like a cozy retreat and more like a safe house, which technically it was. You know you're officially a fugitive now, Frank said the next morning over coffee, as though I needed reminding. If they lock me up, I'll have no way to prove I'm innocent, I replied, stirring my cup with perhaps a bit too much force. We need to dig into who Patricia really is because loyal daughter-in-law isn't her actual job description. Frank's network of law enforcement contacts was still strong, the kind that comes from decades of favors, late-night calls, and holiday cards. While I couldn't risk showing my face anywhere, he could make inquiries without raising suspicion. Let's start simple, he suggested, opening his laptop. Her background, her history, something feels premeditated here. No one orchestrates this level of setup on a whim. We laid out what we knew. Patricia had entered Michael's life 6 months ago as if delivered by fate. Within 3 months, they were married. Now she was mysteriously poisoned, and I was the prime suspect. Coincidence? In my experience, criminals don't rely on coincidence, they manufacture it. Frank began calling old contacts, carefully framing his questions as professional curiosity. Meanwhile, I combed my memory for anything about Patricia. Oddly, I realized how little I actually knew about her. She claimed to be a nurse, yet I'd never heard her mention a hospital, a coworker, or even a late shift. She said she was from California, but her accent carried subtle inconsistencies I'd brushed off. Little details I'd ignored now screamed for attention. An hour later, Frank hung up from his third call and said, I'm going to run her details through some databases. If she's not who she says she is, we'll know. The results came quickly, and they were worse than I'd imagined. Your daughter-in-law doesn't exist, Frank announced, spreading documents across the kitchen table like a prosecutor prepping a jury. At least not as Patricia Peterson. But under the name Victoria Blackwood in Phoenix, Arizona? Oh yes, she's very real. The photos were unmistakable. Same face, same rehearsed smile, same cold, calculating eyes. Victoria had been married to Harold Blackwood, a wealthy 72-year-old widower. He died 8 months after their wedding. Official cause? Complications from food poisoning. There's more, Frank said, producing another file. Sarah Mills in Denver. Married to Robert Mills, age 68. Dead from sudden cardiac arrest 4 months after they wed. Pattern was unmistakable. Patricia, or Victoria, or Sarah, was a predator who married rich older men then inherited after their suspiciously timed deaths. Marriage as a business model, murder as the profit. But one detail gnawed at me. How did she plant the evidence in my house so fast? She was in the hospital when it happened. Frank leaned back. She couldn't have done it herself. Someone else had to. Someone with keys and full access during that exact time frame. The realization hit like ice water. Only Michael, I stopped. My stomach sank. Frank's gaze was steady, careful. If he didn't go where he claimed he went. No, I said automatically, but my voice betrayed the doubt creeping in. Sometimes the people we love surprise us, he said quietly. The timing's too perfect to ignore. That night I barely slept. Memories twisted in my mind until suddenly a detail surfaced like a buoy. Frank, the security camera at my front door. I installed it last week because of the neighborhood break-ins. His eyes lit up. You might have footage from that day? I pulled up the app on my phone, hands shaking as I scrubbed through the timeline. If Michael had gone home like he claimed, the camera would show nothing. But instead, there he was, Michael's car in my driveway, right at the time he swore he was elsewhere. Keys in hand, walking to the door with purpose. He stayed inside over an hour, then slipped out the back, carefully avoiding the camera. He lied, I whispered. Frank put a hand on my shoulder. Now we have proof. For several minutes, I couldn't speak. The betrayal was a physical wound. My son, the boy I'd raised, defended, and celebrated, had helped frame me for attempted murder. Why? I croaked. I don't know, Frank said, but we're going to find out. That evening, against Frank's strong objections, I decided to confront Michael. I need to hear it from him before we take it to the police. I drove to his house, my heart pounding with a sick cocktail of rage and grief. Lights glowed inside, voices carried. Patricia was there too. Perfect. I crept to a side window and listened. Michael, stop feeling guilty. Patricia's voice was smooth and venomous. $7 million and a new life, that's what we're doing this for. Seeing my mother running from the police, Michael's tone was weak, conflicted, but not nearly enough. She treated you like a failure, Patricia cut in, pressing his insecurities like piano keys. With me, you're finally the man you were meant to be. I pulled out my phone and set it on the windowsill, recording. But Patricia's eyes locked on it almost instantly. Michael, your mother's here. Before I could move, she had a gun in her hand. This makes it easier, Eleanor, she called out. Now I can say it was self-defense. I ducked below the window, my pulse thundering. She was going to kill me and make it look justified. Her voice carried through the open window, deliberate and taunting, like some twisted game show host. You just made this so much easier, Eleanor. Come out and let's finish this once and for all. I slid away from the wall and crouched behind the garden shed, forcing my breathing to slow. It was a surreal moment. After decades in law enforcement, here I was, hiding behind lawn tools while my own daughter-in-law hunted me with a gun. Come out, wherever you are. Patricia sing-songed, her tone almost playful if not for the threat of bullets. Through the open door, Michael's uneasy voice floated out. Patricia, this is getting too dangerous. Maybe we should. Think about what? She snapped. She saw us. She heard everything. There's no going back now. We have to kill her for real this time. What if someone hears the gunshot? He asked, still wavering. Then we say she attacked me, Patricia replied without hesitation. The police already believe she tried to poison me. This just seals their case. I kept my phone recording, every word as clear as if they were sitting across from me. The casual way she explained my murder and her cover story was almost breathtaking in its audacity. Michael, help me search the yard, she ordered. Her voice had that clipped authority that told me who was really in charge of this criminal duo. I heard their footsteps on the patio, coming closer. My only hope was that they'd start on the far side of the yard first. This is insane, Michael muttered. But he still followed her instructions. So much for a moral awakening. Insane, Patricia said coldly, is letting a 70-year-old woman ruin everything. Think of it as an early inheritance. That was my cue. As they moved toward the far corner, I crouched low and bolted toward the side gate, slipping out into the alley. My hands shook as I sprinted to my car and started the engine. I had everything now. Security footage of Michael planting evidence, audio recordings of their conspiracy, and Patricia's direct threats. If I could survive long enough to deliver it, I could end this. By the time I reached Frank's house, my adrenaline was still surging. I got it all, I told him. Patricia tried to kill me, and I have proof. Without a word, Frank started a fresh pot of coffee, because apparently caffeine is the standard response to surviving attempted murder. We spent the next hour reviewing the evidence, The camera footage, the recordings, Patricia's clear intent. This is more than enough for conspiracy, attempted murder, and witness intimidation, Frank said, scanning through the files like the seasoned prosecutor he'd once been. And don't forget identity fraud, serial murder, and probably tax evasion, I added. If we're going to build a case, we might as well make it comprehensive. We drove straight to state police headquarters. Thanks to Frank's contacts, we bypassed the waiting room and went directly to a team of detectives. I surrendered myself at the same time I handed over the evidence. It was probably the most dramatic entrance they'd seen in years. Detective Captain Rodriguez listened, reviewed the files, and finally said, "This completely changes the investigation. We're issuing arrest warrants for Patricia Peterson and Michael Wilson immediately." "There's more," I told him, handing over Frank's research. "She's a serial killer with multiple aliases. She's done this before." Within hours, a team moved in. By evening, Michael was in custody. Patricia, however, was gone. She'd vanished from the house, leaving Michael sitting alone like he'd been expecting us. The next day, Patricia proved why she'd survived this long. She called the police tip line, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "This is Patricia Peterson. Everything was Michael's idea. He forced me to help poison his mother. I have text messages to prove it. Even in flight, she was a master manipulator." "She's lying," Michael shouted when he heard. "It was her idea. She manipulated me into everything." But Patricia was already in the wind, likely plotting her next life and her next target. The manhunt lasted 6 days. Despite her head start and skills, she made a mistake. She stuck to her pattern. Police found her 3 states away in a hotel, already chatting online with another wealthy widower. Poor man probably thought he'd found love. When she was brought back in handcuffs, she and Michael finally faced each other. "You lying witch," Michael yelled as she passed his cell. "You promised we'd be together." Patricia smirked. "Oh, Michael. Did you really think this was about love?" Trial was less a search for truth and more a demolition derby where both defendants tried to total each other first. From the opening statements, it was clear the prosecution didn't need theatrics. The evidence did the work. My recordings captured Patricia calmly planning my death and the cover-up, while the front door camera put Michael at my house during the exact window when the poison and list appeared. Conspiracy. Tampering. Intent. It was all there, laid out like a blueprint. Patricia's defense leaned on a familiar refrain. She was an unwilling accomplice, coerced by Michael, a domineering son desperate for his inheritance. Her attorney painted her as the fragile newcomer trapped in a toxic family power struggle. Michael's team, for their part, cast Patricia as a master manipulator, a practiced predator who groomed lonely men, including Michael, and pulled his strings until he danced to her tune. Their goal had been to confirm that neither of them had a functioning moral compass. Mission accomplished. Then came the ghosts of Patricia's past. Frank's research opened the door and the state pushed it wide. Under oath, relatives of Harold Blackwood and Robert Mills testified about the whirlwind romances, the swift marriages, the sudden illnesses, and the even swifter estates. Investigators showed documents tracing identity changes. Victoria Blackwood in Phoenix, Sarah Mills in Denver, and finally Patricia Peterson in our quiet town. Bank transfers. Insurance updates. Handwriting comparisons. A carefully pruned garden of new names and dead husbands. "For the record," the medical examiner said evenly, "the earlier deaths were never ruled homicides. But the patterns are extraordinary, and in light of the defendant's current conduct, highly probative." Jurors took notes like stenographers at a thunderstorm. When it was my turn, I kept it clinical. I testified to the smell of the coffee, the switch, the ER, the planted bottle in my bathroom, the handwriting that mimicked mine, and the patrol car glowing like a neon sign outside my house while I sat inside, freshly designated as suspect. Then I described the camera footage and the night in the yard, Patricia's voice promising to claim self-defense, Michael's wavering obedience, and my escape through the side gate while they hunted me like a fox. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. Prosecutor's closing was crisp. Two people conspired to kill a 70-year-old woman and frame her for her own attempted murder. When the plan faltered, each blamed the other. That is not exoneration, it's corroboration. The jury didn't linger. They returned with guilty verdicts on conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, witness intimidation, and evidence tampering. The additional counts, identity fraud and related financial crimes, were reserved for separate proceedings but hung in the air like thunder you could feel in your bones. Sentencing was its own kind of theater. Courtroom felt colder, though I suspect that was just me. Patricia stood straight, eyes flat, elegant in that way she always was, someone who could hold a smile steady while a house burned behind her. Michael looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of the past months had pressed him inward. Mrs. Peterson, the judge said, voice measured but implacable, you are a predator who has spent years identifying, isolating, and exploiting vulnerable people for financial gain. Your willingness to eliminate those who threatened your plans, including your husband's mother, is chilling. He sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Patricia felt anything, she hid it with professional ease. Then Michael. The judge acknowledged his cooperation in laying out Patricia's methods and the broader pattern, the only reason his sentence would be anything less than catastrophic. But make no mistake, he added, you betrayed your mother and your duties as a son and a citizen. 20 years. 2 decades measured in visiting hours and institutional schedules. He swallowed hard and nodded, as if agreeing with a punishment he'd already considered. They led them out in shackles. Metal clinked, soft but final. Afterward, Frank and I stood in the corridor where everyone speaks in hushed voices regardless of the hour. He squeezed my shoulder, a brief, wordless acknowledgement of both victory and loss. Justice had arrived dressed in its usual colors, cold, correct, and late. In the days that followed, reporters tried to make a spectacle of me, the retired prosecutor who'd been framed with her own coffee cup. I kept my answers short. The system worked because people did their jobs, I told one of them. And because I remembered to install a door camera. That line made the evening news. Frank rolled his eyes and said I'd missed my calling in public relations. I'd like to tell you I felt triumphant. What I felt was complicated. Relief, certainly. Gratitude for the clean geometry of evidence. But also the kind of sorrow that doesn't cry, the heavy, airless kind that just sits with you at breakfast and follows you from room to room. Patricia would live the rest of her days behind concrete and razor wire. That felt right. Michael would serve his time and learn to measure summers by rec yard shadows. That felt necessary. And I would wake up free, pour my own coffee, and try to remember that survival sometimes looks like starting over in the same house with different eyes. People asked if I forgave him. Forgiveness is a door only I can open, and I'm not standing near it yet. Maybe one day I'll walk down that hallway. Maybe not. I do know this: the consequences fit the choices, and the choices were theirs. On a quiet evening not long after the sentencing, Frank and I sat on my back porch with the new camera watching us instead of watching the street. The garden hose lay coiled by the shed, a stray reminder of the night I learned how fast I can still run. Frank lifted his mug. To evidence, he said. To noticing what other people miss, I replied. We clinked porcelain like it was crystal. There's a lesson here, it's not poetic. It's practical. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Keep your doors locked and your footage backed up. And remember that love, if it's real, never asks you to commit a crime or to doubt your own sanity. I'm alive. I'm vindicated. Price was my family as I thought I knew it. Sometimes survival demands the very things you hoped you'd never have to spend. But I kept the one thing that mattered most, myself. And if I'm honest, I did get the last word, not in a dramatic speech, but in a stack of files and a timestamp that told the story better than I ever could. Thanks for listening. If you're still here, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever trusted your gut when everything else told you not to.